Okay, let's continue. Thank you very much for being back on time. We left this bullet points on the screen, and at least we have one feedback from the remote participant, from Andrew Kampling, the one who was talking to us earlier. He would like to extend the last bullet point to a more focused approach leading to action. I think that's a good final bullet point, and I will include that here as we speak. And ask you again if you have something to add, if you are still in agreement with it. Otherwise, we would. Sharon?
Thank you. It will be very quick. So EuroDIG sessions that I attended, they were quite brilliant. So when forming the sessions, we always take care that we have gender balance, geographical balance, and everything. And I think we should be considerate towards some sort of age balance as well, because those people are quite brilliant, and some people really miss the discussion. So, yeah, age balance. So we should make sure that we have youth participation in the sessions because they're super knowledgeable and they're refreshing.
Absolutely, point taken. And we have two that are responsible for youth participation, Auke and Elisabeth.
Yeah, I'll take that into account. And also one more point is maybe because we're here in Trieste, also focus more on the local participants as a speaker instead of the usual suspects.
That would be my hope too. Unfortunately, I must say we have very few locals here today. Apart from those that we already knew, we hope we will be better in reaching out when the event is on.
Just a short comment on that. We had a meeting on Monday with the local community, and we had quite a good participation from the regional government, the municipality. We had university, CISA. We have, civil protection. So that was well attended. So I think it was maybe a bit late for people to, apply for today's meeting, but I'm positive about local participation.
Very good. And also in the planning process. I mean, this open concept is not so usual for everyone, so they have to learn about it. So I hope we will get them on board during the planning process. Roberto?
Yeah, just one remark. A lot of the local participant, because of the hosting organizations that is more oriented to academics and research and so on, will be participating more if there are some topics that are addressing these items of interest. I saw there are several in the proposed items, but I think that if we want more participation from locals, we need to also give a certain importance to the topics that are of interest of this type of participant. Thank you.
And Roberto, I encourage you, as well as the other host organizations, to fight for these local topics when we discuss the proposals and the program in a short while. Anyone else that would like to add? I think we have a remote.
We have Michael Ogia.
Hi everyone, good morning. And it's a pleasure to join remotely. Thank you again, obviously, for having this capacity, everyone. Basically, I just want to add one thing to this list that's not there already, and that's connecting to the existing intersessional activities of the IGF. I think EuroDIG does this really well in general, but this is really more of a call to action, let's say, for especially the organizing teams. One thing that we discussed during the annual DC meeting, or rather the annual meeting of the dynamic coalitions at the IGF in November, was the need to connect with one another more so to really kind of coordinate our work and kind of limit and kind of find where that overlap is and work together. And I think that we need to extend that to the NRIs as well in terms of how the dynamic coalitions work. So, basically, if, for instance, what this looks like to me in my head would be that given how the program is shapes and kind of eventually forms, where are the, basically asking especially the organizing teams to see where those connections to existing work already exist, and maybe kind of encourage collaboration there. So I think that's something that EuroDIG does well, and I think that we can build on an already good existing practice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. I've taken note of that. And with this, I think our list is more or less complete. But of course, it's not finished. I mean, nothing is carved in stone. We can still add something at the end of the meeting. Since we are running a bit short of time and some of our subject matter experts are not be able to be with us because of heavy agenda conflicts, I would like to proceed with the results from the call for issues that will lead us to a hopefully good program. As I said already, in the past we came up with an almost finished program, put that up for discussion, and there was more or less kind of agreement because nothing was really wrong. But we had the feeling that if we leave it a little bit more unfinished, we might get new input and be able to have a little bit more focused program. And therefore, we will start with a very empty program structure. And also not only an empty program structure, but also a program structure that is a little bit different than in the past, taking into account the feedback that we got in particular from last year. So again, we will have a EuroDIG from the 8th till 10th of June. This EuroDIG program will be organized by former EuroDIG participants under the leadership of Elisabeth for all programming matters. She will represent or will take care of it from the secretariat side, and Auke will be responsible for all the logistics, choosing participants, and so on and so forth. But this will be a collaborative effort where Rainer and myself from the secretariat do not really interfere. This is actually self-organized, meanwhile by former EuroDIG participants, which is, I think, a great achievement. Then we foresee for day 0, again, half day of sessions where we offer the rooms to organizations for free, where dynamic coalitions, for instance, can meet, where we will have the NRI assembly, but also where we could invite the team, the champions around recommendation 5A and B from the high-level report to host a session, and that leads to the results that they are planning to present in August. So that would be also something for day 0. At the IGF meeting in Geneva, I got already confirmation from the Child Online Safety Dynamic Coalition that they would like to organize a dynamic coalition meeting on day 0. I also spoke to the DNSI Dynamic Coalition that are also considering doing it again. They did it in The Hague. I'm not yet quite sure about the IoT Dynamic Coalition because Martin Bottermann, the former chair, changed because he's now a member of the board. So we have to see with the new chair if he or she is planning to continue with that. But you will see some other pre-event slots are still open, but I get constantly requests from people telling me personally, I want to have a day 0 slot, can you reserve some? Well, I cannot personally reserve some to you, but we can collect all this and then. But mainly those day 0 slots are taken rather quickly, and they are assigned on a first-come, first-served basis. On the day 1, we propose a slightly different structure. We would propose to start at 9 o'clock with workshops and have sort of a welcome and opening plenary after the first coffee break. We had this issue last year that people were stuck in traffic due to thunderstorm or whatsoever, and the commissioner and the state secretary was speaking in front of an empty room, although during the day all participants came. This was very unfortunate as well as for organizers as well as for the speaker. And we would like to avoid this and hope that people do all the efforts to be ready and be in time for a workshop they are responsible for. therefore, we think starting with a workshop, convening, having a coffee, and then going to a welcome and to an opening plenary would be a better approach to do it. IGF is basically doing it similar. They also start with welcoming in the middle of the day and not in the morning. Then we were considering two opportunities, whether to have a lunch break as usual or not to have a lunch break, because this year there will be a different process in terms of catering. Usually catering was served in one central place, and there was 1 or 2 hours where participants could grab food. This year we have a huge but very nice cafeteria with good food for a decent price, and we will ask participants to self-cater, so to go and buy to the cafeteria and buy their food themselves. They can do this not only between 1 or 2 hours where the cafeteria is open, they have a longer window of opportunity to grab some food. We were discussing, Rainer and myself, if we skip a lunch break and leave it to the participants to find any time of the day, or if we offer a lunch break where everyone then goes possibly to a cafeteria. We still believe that a lunch break is good, because otherwise we would lose a lot of networking opportunities if participants don't have one time where they can meet while queuing for the food or whatsoever and have these discussions. That's why we propose to stick to our 1.5 hour lunch break and then continue with workshops. Then we have another coffee break, a possibility for another keynote, and then a closing plenary. We also propose that we might do a wrap-up of day one, because we have this live reporting from the Geneva Internet platform, and it might be a good opportunity to bring together even all the messages and short reports that are prepared in time to look at them at the end of the day, so that those who could not attend any or other session are at least informed what has been discussed. That's also up for discussion. Another new element is that we have the plenary room as a room where we will have presentations, what we so-called flash sessions, and they have been in a room somewhere at the end of the corridor with no remote participation. We suggest to move these slots, either we call them flash or we find another word, but we propose to move them to the main plenary room, and this has not only this is not only a matter of optimizing the program, is also a matter of our room logistics, because the workshop rooms, at least 3 of them, are very small, and we would not be able to accommodate all the people in the workshop rooms. So therefore we hope that some people could stay in the plenary room, but we do not want to have more extensive, lengthy plenaries, but we would rather propose to have small slots of 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes where people from the local community, people from the global community can present projects, legislations that's going on in their country, put that up for discussion. Companies can present a product, so that we invite more communities for the big stage. That is basically one of the biggest changes that we propose for this year's program. Less plenaries, shorter plenaries, only 60 minutes, more workshops. We would extend from 12 to 16 workshops, and short presentation type of events in the main plenary room. And if this new concept finds agreement, we would basically suggest to do the same program structure on the second day. I will leave you a minute with this rough program structure, but due to time constraints, hand over to Tatjana Tropina, because she has to run. She is one of our subject matter experts that is reviewing the category of security. We received 18 proposals in this category, and I would now give the floor to Tatjana and then come back to this program structure before we go to the other subject matter experts. Tatjana, you have the floor, please.
Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, Tatjana Tropina, assistant professor at Leiden University currently. Sandra, Rainer, do you want me to start the video?
That would help.
Super. Then I'll just do it. Yeah. Sorry, I'm from my university room, and sorry for the hassle that you didn't have time to discuss the structure of the program because of me. I have to admit that I do like this new, more flexible structure, and I do like the idea of having more workshop and shorter plenaries. And also, I do like the fact that to follow this new structure, we were given the possibility to ditch some of the proposals which we didn't find relevant or did find repetitive or didn't find interesting enough. Because for years, for the last 3 or 4 years, I have always been struggling with repetitive issues being submitted and always trying to find the common ground or common angle and mixing them, matching them. And now I didn't have to do this, and that significantly, I believe, significantly improved the quality of clustering and the proposals. I will start with those which I did not find interesting or relevant. There is always a number of online hatred and online hate speech and online violence and terrorism and so on submitted to the cybersecurity track. I do believe that they rather should go in media category, because this is where all the fake news and online content regulation debate usually took place. So I basically didn't cluster them as security. Although if we want them to be somewhere in between, of course, we can always cluster the proposals on those developments into one track and make it sort of interdisciplinary. There are, of course, a number of proposals on the child safety. I heard Sandra already mentioning dynamic coalition on this issue, and I believe that whatever they have, this might fit there, or alternatively, perhaps proposals like cybersecurity classroom for kids might probably deserve a flash session if the submitters are willing to do this. Some of the proposals were irrelevant or repetitive from the last year. For example, there was a proposal which, again, talking about cybersecurity and collaboration and multi-stakeholder approach and all these important things, which in the context of EuroDIG, where we discussed them from various angles, sound a bit bloody-blah to me. And a very strange proposal which was talking about stopping the child industry, extortion, coercion, and trade of child labor and anything you can imagine terrible about this world was in this proposal, but I wasn't really sure how it was related to EuroDIG. I'm sorry if submitter is in the room or listening to this meeting. Now to the best part of all this, what I did find interesting, I did cluster them initially into 4 clusters, but now I think that some of those might be removed from the clusters. For example, I found 2 very different but very interesting proposals, both of them submitted under the umbrella of DNS and cybersecurity, but one of them was more narrow, is DNS Abuse and ICANN Facilitation Center for DNS Ecosystem. And right now, when I look at all this, I do believe that this probably deserves a flash, because this is a bit too narrow. And then the cluster 1 can rely on the proposal about DNS over HTTPS and the influence of these new technologies, DOH, DOT, on the entire system of IG and security issues. I believe that this is a very topical issue, and this might make it a very interesting session. But I know that DNS over HTTPS has already gained some attention during the EuroDIG in The Hague, but I also think that the focus here is a bit different. It is more about influencing the entire cybersecurity ecosystem and IG as a whole. So I will leave it up to the community to decide what to do with this, and if we can build the entire workshop based on one proposal. And also a remark here is that if we are going to convert it into a workshop, indeed, we really have to have a strong focal point for this. So unless the submitter of this proposal is willing, to I'm sorry. Dan, could you please close the door? Sorry for this. So unless the submitter of this proposal is willing to take up the responsibility as a focal point, I wouldn't really recommend to make it as a workshop, because we need a strong lead on this. And now I'm trying to be a bit quicker because I see that I'm taking a bit more time than I thought I would. The digital crime and law enforcement, several very good proposals, and right now Europe is indeed struggling in this trend setting and a legal arm race on electronic evidence. I do believe that this is a very important topic. It should be there. We could find good speakers and strong leads on this topic. However, whoever leads it has to make it a bit different from the last year workshop, although I do think that last year workshop on electronic evidence and EU new directive on this might be interesting to sort of continue the discussion, or at least build upon what we discussed last year. So I would say that the digital crime and law enforcement should be a workshop, maybe to provide for the continuity. We have to have the previous focal point involved into the preparation of this one. I believe that this will serve this particular track, this particular topic the best. And it also feeds I didn't understand the tracks fully, I have to admit, but to me, this fits into the track of digital cooperation and law. And then proposals which I found a bit less sort of on the high priority, but still very interesting. So I did cluster them. They were very interesting proposals on development of the 5G and networks, infrastructures and technologies, and how do they perceived by individuals, how individuals can prevent the risk of becoming victims. How do we also collect this information? I saw that one of the proposals was distributed to me about how we actually assess those risks. How do we assess those risks on individuals? And I think that together they can be combined probably into the risks of new technologies and risk assessment and the user experience. So make it more human-centric than technology-centric, because we know from the past that technical sessions on cybersecurity are perceived as a bit meh among the audience, because we have mostly the governance people. So the technical sessions have either to be educational or have some strong technical speakers, or be more like governance and human oriented. And the last cluster is cybersecurity and data protection. Of course, in light of GDPR and trends in Europe, we always have these issues popping up. And I was wondering if these should be moved to data protection tracks and clusters, or shall we just make it an additional flash or small workshop if we have time? I'd rather make it a sort of small session, or give it to general data protection discussion if we have this under the human rights. And this is all from me. So any questions you might have about these clustering, I'm ready to take. And also on a personal note, I'm very sorry that I'm missing this meeting. This is, yeah, you know how much engaged I am with EuroDIG, and my commitments stay the same, but I have a very busy day today and tomorrow, and so sorry for messing up with the program a bit and asking to put me the first. Thanks a lot. Ready to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Tanya. I would have a question right away. Maybe you tried to say it already, but in order to make it for the Secretariat very clear, and here you basically see that we are really working with the SMEs. It's basically a live process, so we have to ask the SMEs how they see it. We suggest, the Secretariat suggested, after going through all this, to merge one workshop from your category with one proposal from the category technical and operational issues. Is that something that you would basically support, or where you would say, no, leave it as it is and don't mix it too much?
I would say I have to have a look again, but as long as it's about DNS and they complement each other, I'll be fine with these.
It's basic. Paulina is raising her hand
Yeah.
already.
Oh, yeah. I think is it Paulina who is responsible for this category? I think that if she would be for this, I would be supporting this. Yeah.
Okay.
If
So
it's about, if, as far as I understand, it's about DNS over HTTPS and DNS encryption. So yeah, I would support to do this. Yeah. Yeah. Unless Paulina is against.
where's the mic, by the way? Ah, okay. Paulina raised her hand.
Okay, yes. So I just wanted to quickly chime in here on the proposal to merge some of the some of the proposals in Tanya's track to mine. So when I was going through doing my clustering, then I've obviously also received a number of proposals related to the tensions between technical governance within the standard setting bodies and the policy objectives from the legislative perspective. And obviously, most of those proposals were related to the DNS over HTTPS. And as indicating as one of the example of those where those tensions arise. So I've clustered these proposals that are primarily primarily submitted from the perspective how to make sure that there is some particular legislative oversight or legislative or participation from the decision makers and policymakers in the technical bodies. And I also looked into the clustering in the matrix with regards to DNS encryption and cybersecurity, and I've identified two proposals that could potentially be clustered together with my cluster. And so these are particularly the ones with ID 40 and 45, which were also based on these tensions that there are some policy objectives that are not taken into consideration within ITF. And I think the DNS abuse is a bit standalone there, so I would not advocate for putting it together with the cluster, yes, on the technical governance of standard setting bodies. And so I would advocate for moving two proposals from Tanya's track to mine, and for the others, I think we should maybe give a bit of more thought, because I think it's also important to look on the cybersecurity part, which is not part of of my proposals.
What I would advise, if I may, I think that it happened before that we merged the proposals and make them sort of interdisciplinary, inter-category. I do believe that I don't know what you would like to have there. If we are putting proposal 161 into technical issues more, and of course, what I really thought when I read this proposal about technologies and changing the face of modern internet and their influence on governance and security, I did think it would be very hard to make them purely cybersecurity, because they have so many different components. They have governance component, they have technical component, and if we are going to discover only their influence on security, well, their technology for most of them are technology for security and privacy per se. So how we are going to discuss these? So I would favor merging them. If you'd rather handle this alone, fine. If we want to handle this together, subject matter experts in helping focal point, fine too. So yeah, and DNS abuse, yes, absolutely. I saw that it was already marked as flash session, and I also believe that this should go additionally. So I would fully support this. Yes.
Okay, you might see that we're going very much into detail of these proposals, and I think it would help for everyone if you look at the proposals yourself so that you know what the SMEs are talking about. You have been provided all those documents on the website, but also the link was in the email that we sent to all participants. But I think this is exactly the type of discussion that we want, how to get a most focused program. I think what we should do now, we park this for later. Tanya and Paulina can keep this in mind. We will find a sharper and more focused working title for the session, and which proposal, which ID goes to which session could be also resolved later on after this meeting, but so that we can go with one workshop where we know, okay, we have a set of proposals that goes into the same direction, we can bring them together, that's the focus, and then we reconvene afterwards and find the particular ideas for it. We have another hand raise. First it's someone online and then Peter Koch.
Andrew Campbell, please take the floor.
Hi, thank you. It's Andrew Camping speaking. I put in two of the proposals which have been sort of picked up in this discussion about the consolidation between the two areas. One of mine was number 45, and I agree from the discussion you've just had, that makes good sense as part of a wider discussion. The second one of mine, which was number 132, I'm less convinced about, because that was more to do with the impact of consolidation and centralization, which I think is a different subject area. I know it's something which has already been picked up by the Internet Society over the last few months. From the discussion I've just heard, I think that's quite distinct from this area, but I may have misunderstood what people were getting at.
This is Peter again. First of all, I thank Tanya for making the assessment, especially moving DNS abuse a bit to the side. I think that DNS abuse has little to do with security and little to do with DNS, but as was mentioned at the previous ICANN meeting, actually, it's mostly about content control again. So it should be dealt with separately. So that's a perfect pick in my view. And then I would like to issue a word of caution and full disclosure. I've submitted a proposal around, actually two of them, around DOH and surrounding areas as well. I think it's important to really distinguish between the different aspects. We've had discussions about DOH all mixed in one before, and those discussions end nowhere because it's all dominated by this completely side-tracked discussion about the effectiveness or not of filtering. And there are other aspects that need a bit more a wider scope, and I'd really urge everybody that we enable people to keep focus on the different aspects and put that in different working sessions and not mix everything that looks like DOH into one. Thank you.
There was another hand raise from remote.
Yes, Vittorio Bertolo, please.
Hi. Well, of course, I am also one of the proposals of some of these, especially number 40. I think that the merge that has been proposed makes sense. I think that in the end, I've seen, I went through also the other proposals, and there are two main themes that I see around this discussion. One is DOH itself, which possibly deserves one session, which could be the merge of these two, the currently two workshops that are in the matrix. I agree with Peter that maybe if we could separate the different sub-issues, it would be good. I don't know if we can have more than one workshop, but maybe we can just structure the workshop so that we deal with different aspects separate. And the other aspect that I see that was raised in several proposals was basically the more general problem of the governance of the ITF and of the technical standardization activities in a way that they don't conflict with policy objectives and with other stakeholder needs, non-technical stakeholder needs. I think that if I get it right, this could be covered also by the second session in the development of the IG ecosystem category. So I don't know if that's the intention. So maybe that could be another grouping that could be called into play to discuss that part of the DOH related proposals. So I think it's the second in the orange bar on the left. And maybe that could also be a solution. So some of these proposals could go there, and while the ones that are more related, strictly speaking, to DOH could go in this separate workshop.
There are more remote participants. Maybe Andrea Bicali next.
Yes, hello. And sorry for disclosure. had people coming into the office while you were discussing that, Tatiana. So but I heard that you mentioned the DNS abuse session that I proposed, and
I did indeed, Andrea.
Okay, good. And the comment from Peter that just heard that maybe should be a content rather than security. Yes, I see that point. I put it there and without much background because that's something that within ICANN is still developing, but ideally, and that's part of our goals in the next 5 years, but ideally we will then have some more concrete real examples of facilitation center for DNS. And this, I think this is an interesting turning point in the debate of the role of intermediaries that's been going on for some time. So although I don't have yet that enough content for this session, but indeed, I think it is a meaningful move towards a more concerted role that the technical community has in tackling some issues on the internet. And I would like to see the EuroDIG as the space where this discussion is actually happening as well and is promoted. ICANN is doing this move, but certainly it's a concerted move with different stakeholders, with the registry and the registrars, the law enforcement community, and you may be very well familiar with the ICANN manner, but not everybody coming to EuroDIG, and probably giving a session that presents what does it mean, what it's changing in the governance landscape, why ICANN is doing that, and why now, and what the different stakeholders that are not particularly involved in the DNS can participate and contribute. So it can, I don't know if a flash session will be enough to tackle all of that, and I'm very happy to see whether we can merge that into a larger session where the different aspects of what's happening, what are the challenges, and what are the internet players at the technical level doing to tackle those. Maybe that could be a better way to have that.
Okay, I see Tanya, you have raised your hand. Is that an old hand or you?
It is a very new hand. I'm very happy that my proposal clustering turned into sort of almost multidisciplinary discussions. Unfortunately, I can't address the question posed by the first speaker because there are proposals which are not mine, so I wasn't responsible for distributing them. Several issues, mostly replying to Andrea and Peter Koch. Peter, I do understand your concern about the DNS over HTTPS issue session to be about everything and about nothing at the end. But I think that there are only a few sessions we can actually devote to this. I mean, how much DOH can we have at one EuroDIG? A big question mark. So I believe that, okay, we can of course consider separation of those two. But I also believe that those who are focal points and organizers for the session on DOH should be the agenda setters. They should set the focus of the session. And this is how you can basically guarantee that this session will not be about everything and nothing. As to Andrea's point about ICANN and DNS abuse, I think that and Peter Koch can correct me if I misinterpreted it. I think that what Peter meant when he said about content, it is this tension which ICANN community considers ICANN being about narrow technical mission, and almost any debate about DNS abuse will essentially go to the direction of the content regulation. Whether it should or not, it's outside of my area of expertise here, because I'm just responsible for clustering those proposals. I cannot tell you what you actually have to put in the debate. What you are suggesting, essentially, I don't know if ICANN and content regulation and DNS abuse and the difference between two would warrant the workshop. I would say yes, if we move away the DNS over HTTPS and combine, okay, we might have the workshop about intermediary liability and involvement in the content regulation. Also because, and the difference between technical issues. issues. Maybe there could be something built upon in this regard. But first of all, this proposal wasn't submitted, right? Right. So if we widen it, we have to be very careful in terms of how we do not overlap anyhow with media session. I don't know how much they are going to consider the upcoming European Digital Services Act, where apparently these issues will be raised, and intermediary reliability will be raised as well. Maybe it will cover a bit more than the current EU Commerce Directive. It is up to the EU before these ideas are just boiling. So what I wanted to say, I will leave it up to the community to decide if the existing proposal like this, which I would definitely recommend for the flash session. So Andrea, no offense, because it is really too narrow if we are talking about community. It is, if the community decides to widen it, it should be widened from ICANN more about technical security, content regulation, and how technical and standard setting bodies are involved and how do they address these issues within their narrow technical mission. If it's not a flash session, it shouldn't be focused on ICANN only. This would be my sort of limitation I would impose here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tanya. We have another hand raised from remote, Christy Wilson. You have the floor, please.
I'm a young person here on behalf of Euro Youth Mental Health. So Euro Youth Mental Health is a service user group based in London in the UK, but we work with people all over Europe. So this is the first time I've heard of EuroDIG and the programme, so I'm not as aware as other people how it exactly works. But in reading the proposals, I was a bit surprised in the media and content session in the category. I haven't seen a proposal focusing on like the mental health of young people and adults. I saw a lot around fake news and the content that we see on the internet and how we control that. But I didn't feel like it considered the impact it can have on people's health. And I also think to look at how young people and people of all ages can control what they see online and how that can also impact their health and well-being, and particularly their mental health. I know previously at the beginning of the meeting, you mentioned that you would like to get an age balance and, you know, make sure you also get like insight from young people. So I'm just wondering, and I might be wrong, how many proposals have you got coming from young people? Like, is it totally academic? And then maybe that is something to consider in future to make sure we do get that balance.
Tanya, want to answer this?
Yeah, I would like to partially. Yeah, sorry.
Sandra first.
Sorry?
Okay, Tanya, go on.
I would just like to answer partially. I don't have any statistics on how many young people submitted proposals about inclusion of these issues like mental health and so on. We are purely community-based efforts, so we are clustering what we have. As the subject matter expert, for example, and I'm not a media category, I'm just answering for any subject matter expert here. We cannot actually include we can shape the focus, but we cannot bring the new issues because this is up to the community. And I believe that you are new here to answer your question, Kirsty, you're new here, and next year you can always submit the proposal. As to academic, non-academic, I believe that most of our proposals are not submitted by academics, they're submitted by community members, civil society, technical community, and business. So it is. I wouldn't call it academic conference at all, like really at all. So and here I'll stop here.
Christy, it's Sandra speaking. I also, first of all, would like to thank you as a first-time EuroDIGger to participate in the call for issues, but also in this planning meeting. And I'm totally happy that you raised those questions. First of all, I know there's at least one proposal that goes into online addiction. I think it even came from a proposer here in the room. Auki can possibly speak about it later. That might go into the direction. And the other issues that you raised basically belong to the category media and content, and we will come to that later today. And hopefully you can stay online, so then when the discussion is more focused on these issues, that you can still contribute. And yes, as Tanya said, we do have a great participation of young people. In particular, the youth program at EuroDIG is pretty much successful, so don't be worried about that one. For the moment, I would say, since we already got very much into the depth of the interrelation of proposals from two categories, from security and from technical issues, I would ask Tanya if you have anything to add, because you were the...
No, thank you very much. I would like to say goodbye to everyone, and I'm totally gutted to miss you all and this meeting in Trieste. And good luck with all the discussions.
Hang on for one more questions? Hang on for one more minute, please, because there was a hand raise here in the room from Olivier. No, Olivier? Okay, but
hi, Olivier.
Then Sharon, and if that still goes to the category of security, I would ask you to stay online for 1 more minute.
Okay, I'm staying online then.
Okay. Hi, Tatiana. I'll keep it very short. I was the proposer of the...
Wait.
Oh, too loud?
Yeah. Jaren, I forgot to tell that your proposal probably goes to the digital crime and law enforcement unless you want to make it a flash session.
That was my suggestion. So it's like we can do that with a focus on lawful hacking, for example, or a standalone flash session.
If there is any flash session slot left, and you can you can be the head of this flash session, happy.
Okay.
I would happily recommend it. Otherwise, it will go to cluster 2.
Yes, I was going to suggest that. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, I overlooked this because I wrote the email about it, and I somehow thought it was sorted, but should have gotten to my notes for this meeting, but unfortunately overlooked. Apologies.
No, it's perfectly fine.
Could someone tell us the number that makes it just
75.
75.
Okay. Anything else that goes to Tanya's intervention? Thomas?
Just to say that for those that are new, that this is hard work behind, as you realize, behind the different proposals to turn this into a 2-day program. And just a thanks from my side to Tanya as well for her excellent work over the years. And to everybody, new and old people, or young and old and new and perennial people, this is really an exciting part of the planning. Thank you.
Okay. Since we touched it already, I would directly lead to Paulina. That was for the first time clustering the proposals on technical and DNS issues. Paulina, if you would share with us your findings so that we can basically continue the discussion on this. And maybe I would ask all participants, don't promote your own proposals. That's not what we are here for. We are here to build an entire program. It's not about my proposal should be or my proposal could be. That's not the case. We should really focus a little bit more from the top before we go too much into detail.
Okay, so I will also give a very brief summary of what trends I saw in the proposals that were submitted in the category of technical and operational issues. So I think primarily there were quite a few topics that received or were similar or received one or more similar proposals with regards to particular topics. So these are, first of all, the 5G governance received 2 proposals, and I'm happy to see that it's been suggested to get included in the plenary session. So I would like to support that proposal from the Secretariat. I think it's definitely a topic that EuroDIG should be focused in a plenary discussion, and that's great. And I also want to highlight the fact that one particular proposal was also focused on the digital, so-called digital sovereignty as one of the priorities from the European Commission, and I think this will definitely tie nicely to the ongoing Commission priorities and the debates in Europe. So I would like definitely to support the proposal to include it as a plenary session on day 1. Then we've already touched the DOH and the different aspects of this discussion. So one particular clustering that I've done and that I've already mentioned and we discussed with Tanya just now is the technical governance of standard setting bodies. So the tensions between self-regulation and legislative oversight. So this, I will not go into more details, we discussed it already, so yeah, it will be then for us to later to decide whether we want to separate the pure governance discussions with a workshop on the DOH and cybersecurity. Then another interesting proposal or two proposals that I clustered under the name of challenges and uptake of modern internet standards, so focusing on primarily IPv6, DNSSEC, HTTPS, RPKI. I think this proposal that has now been marked in the matrix provided by Secretariat with the workshop as a workshop proposal. I think this can be quite an interesting opportunity to get some practical outcomes from that workshop. Perhaps maybe list the challenges and possible solutions for greater uptake of existing standards. So I would like to also highlight the possible practical outcome from this cluster. And so I think these are the main priority highlights that I wanted to give you today.
Thank you, Paulina. Are there any questions and comments? Roberto?
Yeah, I have one question and one comment. The question is related to the universal acceptance, because I see in the scheme that has been distributed that some of the proposals appear both as cluster, is the first cluster of technical and operational issues, but they also appear as being lumped together with the dynamic coalition on DNS issues. So I see the same numbers of the proposals in the dynamic coalition on day 0. So my question is, which way are we going? And if I may, I would say that a lot of the proposals that are now being part of the cluster would not really fit well in the program of the dynamic coalition on DNS issues, because that is strictly operational DNS issues, is focusing on this, whereas some of the other proposals that are in the cluster have an impact on also local content, and so that we could, if it's a separate cluster, we can have a wider debate. That's my personal opinion. It's just I don't know how we go on that. And the second is a comment, although it's not recommended that people talk about their personal proposal. I would like to say a couple of words, because there might be a misunderstanding on the quantum technology, because when I proposed that, I was thinking about the implications that it has, for instance, with DG Connect initiatives, with a network, several networks that are being developed, and there's another group in Vienna that has that is developing interesting things on the development and deployment of quantum networks, and I personally believe that we will be able to bring several points of views on this. Of course, we need to build the conditions for having moving that to a specific cluster. But I would like to be able to have the time to verify if this is a possibility.
Thank you, Roberto.
Okay, if I may just quickly comment on Roberto's comment. Yes, exactly on the universal acceptance. I had a feeling that we moved it to this dynamic coalition, but I also was a bit confused with the agenda. But yes, of course, this was also one of the highlights, one of the clustering that I did for the technical issues. But I assumed that we will be having it on day 0. That's why I didn't mention. But you're right. You raise a very interesting point. Perhaps we could have a separate workshop if we have on maybe even on day 0, maybe even directly before or after the dynamic coalition.
You mean separate on universal acceptance, or that would add another workshop on universal acceptance? The point is why we put it into the dynamic coalition. As I said, the DNSI dynamic coalition focused in their first year on universal acceptance. They might find another focus for the next year. That's what they told me. They are also not yet clear if they would like to have a session on day 0 of EuroDIG, because this involves travel for quite some participants. What we do from the Secretariat, when we have an idea that they could do it, we move certain proposals to this day 0, because then we think it could be at least covered in the 3 days, even if not in the main program. But since there is a lot of uncertainty involved, I would for now add, let me know. The first workshop is the first proposal is called Universal Acceptance, IDNs, and Multilingualism Online. And you say there must be another thing on universal acceptance. Is that what I get?
No, I think it was from the perspective that I had 3 proposals on universal acceptance, and yes, and we have the dynamic coalition meeting on day 0. And as I understood, that there might not be an opportunity for really a community discussion on that, because it will be primarily a meeting from the people involved with the dynamic coalition. So I was just maybe suggesting an opportunity for community to also discuss the issues around universal acceptance.
Yeah. But this is the first one which is here proposed as a workshop.
Yeah.
Roberto, take the mic, please.
That was my question, because some proposals I see, for instance, 57 and 87, if I'm not wrong, they are listed twice, one as a cluster and one as a part of the dynamic coalition. In my opinion, they don't fit in the dynamic coalition, but they are best located in the cluster. So my proposal would be, following the question, that we keep the cluster, not duplicate this cluster, but keep this cluster as a separate thing from the dynamic coalition that might not even talk about universal acceptance as their focus.
Okay, now I understand, and to explain the rationale behind, we don't know exactly what the proposer is interested in. As long as we see some certain keywords, we say that could fit here or that could fit there, and it's up to the proposer to decide in which part of the program, may it be a dynamic coalition, may it be a workshop or a plenary, he or she might participate. That's why we put them into certain issues. This is not exclusively, it's an option. That's why some of the proposals appear on different points. Okay, Paulina, one question to you. Maybe this was a misspelling. You said you would propose one session as a plenary. You were very clear about the last one, challenges and uptakes of modern internet standards, where you said that could be a good workshop where we come up with concrete proposals, thinking what we discussed today in the morning. This is a clear demand that we will come up with, focus on clear proposals. Did you mean that one of the sessions you would propose as a plenary, because at the moment they are all suggested as workshops?
No. So regarding that particular one, the uptake of challenges and uptake of standards, to stay as a workshop.
Okay.
Yes, and the plenary comment was only for the 5G, because it was also a cluster in it's not reflected there, but it was a cluster when I did my clustering. And it's already reflected in day 1 plenary session. So it was just a comment of support that I agree how it was put as a plenary.
But basically, last question, you have not found any glitches in the way the Secretariat now merged and worked with those kind of things?
No, I think we addressed. So yes, my primary comment was with the possible connection with Tanya's sessions, and yes, and then the clarification from Roberto on the universal acceptance.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would ask maybe you, maybe also Peter, who had strong opinion on that, and maybe we can also discuss with Tanya to come up with a suggestion how we are handling these two sessions, if we give them another focus, if we divide them, which goes where. We can look at the proposals in detail later on, but that we know at the end of the day what is the focus out of these two things, because I also remember that these are two sessions where we had really very substantive proposals being made, and we should not lose them. Any other comments on security, technical issues? Because then I would move to another SME that has some time constraints. That would be Sorina, and she is joining us online. Sorina, you have the floor.
Thank you, Sandra. Hello, everyone. And as Tatiana, I'm also sorry I'm not able to join you online in Trieste. I am in Geneva these days for the MAG, and it is really unfortunate that there has been this clash, but well, we deal with what we have. I won't turn on my camera because Wi-Fi is quite unstable at EuroDIG, unfortunately also. I'll go quickly through proposals that were submitted under the Internet Governance Ecosystem, but I'll do so by commenting on the clustering, the new clustering proposed by the Secretariat, just trying to be faster and bring more efficiency into the discussions. The only general comment I would like to make is that this year, I think for the first time in many years, we have received quite many proposals under the development of IG ecosystem category. And many of them were quite substantial, unlike previous years when we normally only got proposals about improving internet governance, bringing more stakeholders, bringing more diversity. This year we also had something different, and I'll go through this a bit later as I go through the clustering proposed by the Secretariat. So on that note, let me open my many documents. And this also relates to what Tatiana and who else?
Paulina.
And Paulina, yes, sorry, discussed under the cybersecurity and tech clusters. There have been some proposals on the challenges of internet standardization processes. And although the Secretariat proposed merging them with some other proposals under my category, that doesn't really fit. So I would suggest moving proposal 40 and 45 under everything that has been discussed so far related to internet standardization processes, challenges, issues related to those. If we want to give a slot to tech diplomacy and interdependence, that could go as a flash or whatever we call them now. And then the only other proposal here was 120, which to be honest was a bit confusing, but again, I don't think it fits under any of challenges of internet standardization or tech diplomacy, so it might go maybe into something related to trust if we have something on this on the program, but definitely not on anything else. So again, just to be clear, I think 40 and 45 should go into whatever we call it, but discussing internet standardization processes. And related to what has been said before on DOH, I also have the feeling, as some of the previous speakers have said, that maybe it's not such a good idea to combine the discussions on internet standardization processes, governance, and related issues with the discussion specifically on DOH, because I felt those were going more in depth into DOH and whether it works for privacy or not, and specific things. But I would defer that to the subject matter experts for cybersecurity and technical issues, since it's not really related to the development of the IG ecosystem. Then what was really interesting was that we had quite many proposals on digital sovereignty issues. And on this note, the clustering proposed by the Secretariat works perfectly fine to me, with only one small exception, and that's proposal 158, which is mostly about data governance, rights of individuals to decide what happens with their data. So I would put that under anything which has something to do with privacy. And in any case, deferring it to the human rights subject matter expert. I think we should do our best not to lose this workshop during the discussions today. I think it's the first time actually so many proposals are put forward on related issues, including on matters related to regulatory fragmentation, how more regulatory proposals and legislative proposals at the national level might impact actual technical functioning of the internet. So I would really recommend that we keep this and we do not merge it with anything else. We do not bring any more proposals under this workshop. We just keep what we have, remove 158, and that's that. And then going back to what I've said before, we had many proposals on how to improve the internet governance processes, IGF initiatives, what we have learned from previous processes, how we can bring more stakeholders on board, the usual proposals and recommendations on these issues, and what the Secretariat suggested on actually ending EuroDIG with a 1-hour plenary session on this probably works, and bringing also the high-level panel's recommendation, again, 5, whatever, maybe that's not the best way of calling the recommendation, but bringing this also into the discussion and then looking a bit forward, improving internet governance while keeping in mind the digital cooperation discussions in the framework of the follow-up on the panel's report. And these were the main 3 categories under the development of 5G ecosystem broader category. And then we got a few other proposals. Some of them were even related to universal acceptance, but those have already been covered. The .org case, which I guess can be covered as a standalone topic, and some other very specific proposals, which I would leave to the Secretariat to get in touch with the proponents and see if they would like to tackle them under day 0, fireside chats, presentations, or any other issues. So briefly, this is it from me. Just to wrap up quickly, keeping digital sovereignty as it is, ending with the plenary on internet governance, looking into the future, and that would be it. Thank you, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Sorina, thank you. Before I open the floor for others, I have just a question for clarification. You said digital sovereignty and take out 185, or take out 185 and keep that one as a separate thing. That was yet not really clear to me.
Let me go back. What number again?
185, 58, sorry.
58. That's again mostly about data governance and the rights of individuals to decide on what actually happens with their personal data. So we need to take it out because it's not on digital sovereignty as related to the rest of the proposals. And if there's anything in the program on trust, on privacy, on these kind of things, I would move it there.
But not to miss, what was the one where you said you would definitely keep that one? This was the important thing.
I meant keep. No, not a proposal, but the actual workshop on digital sovereignty. That was my key message, is keeping that and not merging it with anything else or not bringing anything else here.
Okay, thank you very much. Understood. Then we have hand raised, one from remote, Vittorio Bertola, and then I saw Jörn Erbgut. Anyone else that would like to join the queue? No, then let's go with Vittorio.
Okay. No, I am a bit confused, let's say, because from one standpoint, we're saying that maybe one workshop for DOH is not enough and already DOH would deserve more. And now we are all, but on the other hand, we are clustering 3 different clusters into a single workshop on DOH, or at least this is the proposal. So honestly, I think that the proposals that are currently in this part of the program, especially I think 40, 43, and 45 have quite some coherence, and they are not really immediately related to DOH. I mean, DOH was maybe the initial issue that sparkled the thoughts, but I think they really are about the relationship between public policy objectives and the private sector, meaning both the ITF, the standardization process, and also, if you read 43, in general, the private companies and the big platforms. And I think this is an interesting aspect. I mean, in a way, it's symmetric to what Peter was saying about the governments doing stuff on their own and not listening to the multi-stakeholder process. And I think this is the symmetric aspect of the private sector also not listening to the multi-stakeholder process. And so I think it would make for an interesting workshop if we could keep it. So that would be, I mean, and maybe we can put here what is not, I mean, also from the other 2 clusters in the bottom part of the matrix, what is not immediately related to DOH. specifically. But I think this is a much broader discussion, which is in the end separate from the DOH discussion.
Vittorio, in reply to what you just said, Polina is raising hand, and I give her the floor first.
So, Vittorio De Polina from Center, just to respond to your comment, yes, I think we just confirmed that the proposals, particular proposals that were identified both by Tanya and Sorina, will move to the technical workshop on the issues between the policy issues and the technical governance bodies, as in standard setting bodies. So I think, yeah, I think this was just to clarify that we've already discussed this, and I think Sorina just confirmed that indeed these two proposals do not fit into her track, so she's okay of these two proposals to move somewhere else. And I requested previously that I will be happy to merge these with the other proposals within the technical track. I hope that I respond to your question now.
Okay. Next is Jörn.
I would like to address two issues. One is 158, and I agree this is a data protection or privacy issue in my view, and it fits well into the plenary of rethinking GDPR. So I don't have an issue to put it there. I think it fits well. And the other thing I'm missing a bit is the governance of decentralized platforms, which is, I don't know why, arrived in an IG ecosystem. I'm not sure if it's well placed there, but I think it's an important issue and we should give it some space. So what did you think about this this issue?
What is the number of that proposal?
148, governance of decentralized platforms.
Let me quickly do a search. I think this went into a standalone topic, if I'm not wrong. I'm juggling between multiple documents here.
Yes, indeed, it is at the moment as a standalone topic. Governance best practices for an ecosystem based on WOAN and governance of decentralized platforms. And we put in brackets, ask Sorina.
So I guess I would make it an open question to everyone. I don't think the two actually relate to each other. So maybe we invite the proponents to come up and suggest some fireside chats or presentations. Unless someone else from some other category has a suggestion of putting these into their categories, proposed workshops or any other sessions. I don't think it fits, as it has just been said, with anything else under the development of the age ecosystem, but I also don't have a very clear idea of where else to put them other than just keeping them as a standalone.
Okay. We decided not to discuss single proposals in detail, but look at it from a broader perspective. I saw Roberto wants to reply, and also Thomas Schneider.
Yes, just reading number 94, I'm under the impression that that could fit under community networks in that category, but I think that we should ask the submitter if I understood well the proposal.
Roberto, maybe you understand what WOAN is, based on WOAN?
Well, because I've heard a presentation from Ramon a while ago, and I assume he's talking about the same thing, and is creating a wide area network in a rural area. So I just suggest that we check with him before before taking decisions.
Good.
I don't think they have anything to do with each other.
Yeah, On that, I think we agree. And if Roberto thinks it might fit under the community networks broader category, then let's see with the proponent and look into that, but definitely not putting them together under anything.
So in the sense, since they are not related to each other, in my opinion, and 94 could be moved in a different cluster, we could leave the other one as standalone.
Fine with me. Thank you, Roberto.
Okay, perfect. Then Thomas Schneider. And I saw another hand raise somewhere in this direction. No? Was there any else who raised a hand online? There was a question online. Online is a discussion going on. Unfortunately, we will not be able to bring the discussion of the Zoom chat to this room. So whoever wants to join this discussion, please log into the Zoom and then you can see what's going on there. But now, Thomas.
Thank you. Just a comment and a question on the notion of digital sovereignty. And I have not been able to go through all the proposals behind it. I didn't have the time. But this is an issue that on national level, on European level, also at the IGF, I think is gaining relevance. And it has several aspects to it. One is the autonomy or sovereignty of the whole country. That has come up with the issue of 5G and dependence on technologies from non-European countries, whether from east to west, and also of the growing, let's say, proliferation of oligopolies, of a small number of platforms that spread throughout all our lives. It started in the media sector. Now you have one platform for hotels, you have one platform for other things. So there's a feeling with many people that basically there's a loss of control, of their new gatekeepers spreading in almost all areas of our lives that become, they may offer practical tools and applications, but there's a growing dependency and they may eliminate alternatives. And then the notion, if you take it from individual sovereignty or self-determination or autonomy, that again, because of the spread of comfortable applications from these platforms, people rely more and more on a small number of platforms, and there's a fear that there will be a dependence, if not an active control, but at least a dependence on these platforms. And in my country, and that's also what I heard also in the parliamentarian session, many people ask questions like, okay, what do we do? Of course, one element is competition policy and how to deal with oligopolies or monopolies. The other part is probably the more constructive one, is how to foster, and this is the notion also of decentralized platforms, how to foster and support local decentralized alternatives that may offer similar services of a value added that people will have, and us as governments and the whole society will continue to have alternative to the global platforms that offer great services, but that may also have some risk in them. So this is an issue that I'm feeling that is growing in importance, and my definitely also from our side. And my question is how this could maybe appear a little bit prominently in the program of EuroDIG, how you see connections to workshops and our proposals for issues that have come in.
Thank you, Thomas. Valentina, you raised your hand. Where's the mic? No, then remote participants won't hear you.
Ooh, careful. Yes. Good morning. Yeah, no, I just wanted to echo Thomas.
And Valentina, since
yes.
you were late, introduce yourself, please.
Sorry. Hi, everyone. I'm Valentina Scialpi from the European Commission. I wanted to echo what Thomas was saying and maybe clarify at least what I don't want to impose any definition on this, but maybe what we think on our side. By digital sovereignty, which for a lack of a better word, yes, it could be a bit compared to autonomy more than sovereignty. One thing is, of course, localization of data and content, which is not our idea, so it's not to create fence or wall around Europe or around the European countries, but it is more on the infrastructural side, so on the autonomy, not being dependent too much on non-European infrastructure. That's pretty much it. So we have a totally different take compared to what Russia or China would mean by digital sovereignty. This is in the context of EuroDIG, of course. The global context is a totally different discussion and point of view, but certainly, yes, not only is taking track I would say about time that is taking more stage, this issue, because it would be more and more relevant in the future.
So very concretely, you suggest to change sovereignty and authority?
No, autonomy, what authority?
Oh, sorry.
No. I mean, we can just keep it sovereignty. I just wanted to clarify that does not mean to create another Chinese firewall, a European firewall. We mean an autonomy more than closing autonomy from the infrastructure point of view, and not so much on the content or data point of view.
Okay. So one question to Sorina, but everyone in the room, and for us as Secretariat to do to take the right decisions. Then I see that there is a lot of interest or a great demand on a session on digital sovereignty. That this should be a focus. And when I see that we took out some of the proposals, like the 40-something, 2 or 3, on what we clustered in tech diplomacy, interdependence, challenges of internet standardization process, for me it looks like this session is losing the substance, so we possibly can take that out. Is that what I understood? Sorina, question to you, but also to the others in the room? Because then we could eliminate it from this list already.
So I think this takes us back to the previous discussion related to also the proposals under the tech category. So there will be 2 different sessions, one on everything related to standardization processes, the governance of those processes, and whatever happens, bringing more stakeholders in, helping those bodies make decisions. And then having the separate session on DOH. So that would mean we'd still need 2 separate sessions. And if I'm not wrong, now under the technical cluster, you only have 1. So the idea would be to keep 1 on governance issues, which is the one you have now under the development of IG, and the other one on DOH, which would go under the technical category, though I know the categories don't really matter at the end.
Okay, and shall I tell you something, Sorina? In one of our previous versions of this matrix, we indeed had an arrow, a connecting arrow, between this technical, the security, and this governance session, because we could see that it somehow relates, but then we thought it's going too much of a connection, so let's take it out again. But I see these are, and to be honest, these were also the things where Rainer and I were shifting around and working a lot of this. So this goes into a discussion that SMEs have to have a closer look in. But I'm happy. And last question for the plenary, where we propose to have this session evolving internet governance, which includes then also the high-level report and all these kind of things that we proposed would go in the plenary. Is that something that would you agree to, or?
Yes, as long as we find a focal point able to not let the discussion go too much into, issues that we have been discussed before, mostly in the context of the NRI assembly, like bringing more stakeholders and youth and these kind of things. So yes, I would keep it as a plenary, but have a very strong focal point, and I'm happy to help that focal point focus the discussion.
Absolutely, and possibly also the working title needs to be a bit more sharp in order to get the message right. Okay, yes. Then there was another hand raised. Was it Giacomo? Giacomo, Valentina has the mic.
Giacomo Mazzone from EBU. I think that the digital sovereignty is a concept that, and is also a wording that has become a key point for many of the reflection at the European level. If you remember what Angela Merkel said in Berlin, what has been echoed by the French in other occasion, of course, is with the caveat that Valentina said that it's a different concept, but means that the sovereignty of the European citizen remain within Europe. And I think that this one of the links, or the possible links of EuroDIG with the European debate. And in my opinion, this deserves more than a workshop. It has to be at least a plenary, or if we don't want to put in a form of the plenary, it has to be something where we ask the political intervening people, the European Union Commissioner or whoever, and the national representative to come and to bring their discussion on that and share with us. Because in many countries, the regulatory approach is based on that. And I think that we need to intercept this discussion and bring at the EuroDIG.
Okay, thank you, Giacomo. We are also trying to monitor the online discussion a little bit in order to bring that into the room. I really encourage the online participants to rather raise their hand and speak to the room so that we can also hear and learn what they think instead of discussing it online, because then we would have two different rooms where two different discussions are taking place. So if you have deep concerns with what we are speaking here, please come into and speak to us instead of putting too much effort into the chat. But there was one question in the chat that I would like to answer. What means a follow-up workshop? And this is exactly on these two sessions of the tech diplomacy and interdependence challenges on internet standardization processes and digital sovereignty. When we were clustering those, and we see that there will be some shifts, but when we stick to those focus workshops, they are two sides of a coin. They have been two sides of a coin, and that's why we said, let's look at this aspect first and then into the digital sovereignty second. And they should be close to each other, follow up on each other, so that possibly the same people that spoke about the tech diplomacy and interdependence then also come into discussion where digital sovereignty is going to be discussed. This is the idea of a follow-up workshop. It's a proposal, it's not a must. We will see where this day leads us to. Any other questions or comments from remote? Yes, who is it?
We have Andrea Beccali first.
Hello. So on digital sovereignty, I actually went back to my notes from the GF in Berlin to what Chancellor Merkel said, because I think this is something that it's extremely relevant, and it would be a good occasion for the EuroDIG to focus probably a plenary on that. On what do we mean as internet sovereignty in Europe? And I want to see what Merkel said in my notes. You know, she was very clear. It's not protectionism, it's not state control flows, but the capacity as European, as individual, to determine our digital sovereignty, to do not let it be shaped by economic interest or by geopolitics, rather. So I think probably a debate, including the political representatives, on what do we mean for sovereignty, and maybe after the EuroDIG, we can even get rid of the word sovereignty. There's so many charged meanings. Could be a good session. I mean, even at one point, you know, she said the importance is to preserve the core of the internet as a global public good, and a fraction internet is basically the failure in this case. So, you know, having this being clarified in a session where we invite the political leaders to define what's a sovereignty concept for Europe, I think would be a very good way to put EuroDIG at the center of this debate.
Thank you, Andreas. I see Urio, Mattia Fantinatti, and Valentina.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is an important subject and would really merit a plenary. And as it was mentioned by a couple of speakers, this is a political subject. This is a highly political subject, because the concept of sovereignty in the digital sphere, internet sovereignty, whatever, that was coined first by Vladimir Putin or his people there. And I must say that it was kind of shock to me in Berlin when I heard Angela Merkel talking about digital sovereignty, which I before have associated with different kinds of societies and things. Of course, we have to, the European digital sovereignty comes from the fact that everybody is really annoyed by the dominance of Google and Facebook and all the American platforms, and this has raised this sort of call for digital sovereignty for Europe. However, I mean, the danger is that this is confused by what the Russians called their own information space. Like information space would be something like airspace, and so that, I mean, this is an important subject, and we need to devote some sort of high level resources to that. Thank you.
Can I abuse of being the media in this case?
Only because it's you. Only because it's you.
No, I think I just want to elaborate on what Irio said, that the problem is one of the elements that makes sovereignty of a state is to have the information about the citizen of the state, and to communicate, the capacity to have a dialogue with the citizen of the state. This is why the other state talk with the government, because they think that talking with the government, they are incapacity to talk with the population of that country. But today, looking at Italy, if you want to know more about the Italian citizen, you know more through Facebook profiles. And if you want to communicate to them, as been said by one of the previous Italian ministers, it's easier if you send an email to sarname@gmail.com than any other Italian mail system available, electronic mail system. So probably Putin raised in a blunt way, but issues that are concerning every modern state, unless that we want to dilute it in a different world. But Mattia probably has the answer.
Of course not. I am a politician and I don't have the answer. The politician doesn't give the answer. A politician say it depends, you know. But I would like to stress the fact that this topic is really, I think, very important. Not just on internet, on internet government, but even for the further upcoming. I mean, artificial intelligence. Whose data belongs to, or some other technology. And so just, I would like to suggest one topic. I think I have just texted with Minister Pisano, the digitalization of Italy, and I think that it could be important to make maybe a panel in order to discuss of these topic points.
With politicians?
Yes, with a politician. Now I asked to the availability to Minister Pisano, and he said that yes, definitely agree with that. So I would like to give my contributor, like Minister Pisano, maybe even in the EuroDIG. That's it. Of course, yes. No, Bruno. Please, you are in Italy, and Italy is a gentleman. It's very important.
Thank you. So we already have one first clarification from a native speaker, Chris, who said that it's sovereignty and not sovereignty. We can start from that. Since I'm not a politician, but I am a bureaucrat, I can already say that, well, talking from the political scientist point of view, sovereignty means that you have the control of the force, of the use of the force in a country. Now, digital, of course, is a totally different point of view. Honestly, I think it's very important. Actually, it's coming even too late, this discussion. So it's very, very important, but I wouldn't make it a session where we have 10 speakers and they all say what they mean by that, because we will just have 10 different points of view and nothing more than that. So we will not. We don't want to make a session on having 10 different definitions of digital sovereignty. I don't really necessarily see the follow-up with the one before, but nevertheless, maybe it's me that I don't see it. And lastly, yes, I said we should not. I mean, it's a slippery slope to talk about this issue and make it a content data localization, because then we are really going into a gray zone. For us, I said again, but I don't want to impose our point of view. It's more the autonomy on the infrastructural side, precisely because we don't want to go into data localization and content localization in the hands of non-European or certain actors that are not necessarily democratic, let's put it this way, very diplomatically.
Valentina, I think it would be utmost important if the European Commission participates in the shaping of this?
Certainly, but again, yes, we will actually. I mean, I'm very happy because I see that my 3 proposals all made it in some way or another in a plenary. Now, I don't want to become the European Commission to become the dominating the program, but certainly we will help in one plenary at least to maybe take. I don't know if this is still the case that the partner take responsibility for one plenary, but I will be happy to do it at least in one of the 3. This could be, or certainly we can participate, but again, if we start getting all politicians, they will all give you different point of view or different definition of this, which I don't know that's what we want, really.
We can discuss the details later. It's just important that even if it's a workshop or a plenary, that there's participation in the process and not only as a speaker.
No, yes. That's the point. But I can only take one plenary of the 3. Yeah, that's I proposed.
We have now a queue in operation. Yeah. First, I would like to give the floor to an online participant who is waiting for quite a while, then Jörn, then Thomas, and then... Was? Nee, wir nehmen hier den Andrew. So, Andrew first, then Thomas, then Jörn, then Frederick, and then I close the queue on this part. Or is there another from...
Yes, we have Sorina also.
Sorina, of course, she has the last word.
So Andrew, is your go.
Lovely, thank you. Firstly, thank you for the clarification on what was intended by the reference to a follow-on workshop. That was helpful. And I agree that there's likely to be a lot of overlap of interest between those 2 sessions. So it would make a lot of sense to do one after the other. So I think that there's good logic behind that, not least of which because from a digital sovereignty point of view, if you go to a lot of the standards fora, I think you would have an outright rejection of the right of governments to have any say in the governance of the internet, and that's something that should be left entirely to the technologists. So I think there's a healthy debate to be had about the friction between those 2 points of view. So I think it's a good way to do it to ensure that you get the same audience and speakers ideally within both sessions. So that was my point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we should not focus on defining a name, and we shouldn't talk about sovereignty. We should talk about what the issue is basically. And in the discussion that we are having is not the Putin vision of having the government or the state controlling things, but in German we call it Selbstbestimmung, so self-determination, that the people can decide about their own lives. And it actually goes more into the infrastructure part, and we, for instance, we now have about to launch a network that is growing daily about people who care about this, and we've identified 4 or 5 use cases. One is health. Another one is mobility, another one is electricity management, or energy management, and another one is education. If you take the mobility sector, it used to be Swiss people that were measuring traffic in Switzerland, including data from Swisscom, telecom provider. Now the traffic jam messages are based on Google data. It's the same in if you want to find out where to go from A to B, how to buy a ticket, you go on Google Maps, they give you all the choices. So basically, there's a new gatekeeper, new intermediary, which is always the same out of 1 or 2, 3, that is mixing in and basically pulling everybody apart. It's always between offer and demand. There's one new gatekeeper. And this is something that people start to worry about. It's about, and as an individual, like, okay, will I be completely dependent on one single platform, global platform that tells me how to do A or how to get from A to B, how to deal with my health data, how to bring the data from Dr. A to Hospital B where I currently am, and so on and so forth. And that is then linked to what we call like public service, Grundversorgung, like basic offer where people expect the state to organize your transport system. Not that doesn't mean that it's state-run, or your health system, or your education system, and people expect some guarantee of the state that it keeps the responsibility for these everyday infrastructures to function. And the dependency, not just on the technology, but more and more on the software, on the data management of actors where you have no control or no knowledge what they do with it, is something that worries people. And basically, I would rather talk about autonomy or self-determination, and put it in the people in the focus, not the governments. It's not about our governments controlling our lives, it's our governments making sure that we control our lives, that we decide, okay, if I go from A to B, that I get alternative offers than just Google who tells me what is possible in my life, but that I can choose my own services, that there are actually services. So this is the focus that we would see it, and then it's not the Putin discussion, it's the discussion, how do we make sure that our people have a choice in how they lead their lives, how they organize their lives, that they have a choice in offer, and how to deal with their data. That's the focus that we would suggest. And we think it's fundamental for the individuals, but then again for the functioning of the whole society. And not from an exclusive point of view, but just from a allowing people to take free decisions point of view. That's the focus that we would like to see. All the people that I work with in this network that we started on national level, and we are trying to look for partners to start this on European and maybe global level, because your data don't stop. You can start locally with public transport and postal system and health system and water treatment, energy management, but in the end it's a global issue. So this is, on national level, this is a big debate in Switzerland.
One comment from my side, I would ask us not to go too much into detail about this topic, because later on we will have from another category coming in efficient regulation of global platforms. So we are touching already on that issue, and we should possibly go a step back for this moment and give the floor to Jörn now, and then to Frederick, and then Sorina, and then I have a final question.
I try to be brief. I think the title is good, digital sovereignty, because it's heavily used, and I completely agree with your point of view. And of course, if we say those platforms shouldn't be used anymore, they should be limited, we also deprive people of the freedom to use them. So it is a question of human rights versus digital sovereignty of governments, and this this problem, I think, needs to be presented, and to make sure that the outcome is exactly what you suggested, and not that the governments just control it.
If I can just intervene for 1 second, but this is not about killing Google. It's about making sure that there are alternatives, which is a completely different narrative.
I agree.
Just to.
Frederick, please.
Sorry, so thank you. I'm a bit confused now, because I believe I might add confusion to the whole conversation, because you're right, Valentina. If we continue this conversation, everybody will come up with a different definition of sovereignty. I thought it was just about data and the way we in Europe handle data. And that was my belief that it was. And it's about principles. In Europe, we have principles about data that is fair competition, GDPR, privacy. This is how we see the way we will handle data. And my belief was European sovereignty is something at the core of the current Commission objective. And with this in mind, I would just suggest we be opportunistic. We claim that we want more high-level contribution to the EuroDIG. That kind of session, including in a plenary, might attract those people who really want to contribute to that, the principles on how Europe, not the rest of the world, intends to actually handle data with the principles that are really European principles, among them privacy. So if that is the case, then I would believe that is really a wonderful topic to just leverage and put at the highest level than just a workshop. But I would leave the word to Sorina and this group of people. But I believe it would be, we should not miss that opportunity if that is the case. Thank you.
Thanks, Frederick. Sorina, you have the last word on this, but please stay online until I finish this round, because then we go to lunch. I have a final question. Sorina, you have the floor, please.
Sure, thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Frederick, for already covering part of what I was about to say, and also related to what many people have said about transforming this digital sovereignty discussion into a plenary session. And as Frederick has said, adding a high-level dimension to it. I would be very much in favor of this kind of approach, My only concern is that I guess we cannot really add the new plenary. So looking at what we have now in the program, one possible suggestion could be to drop the plenary on evolving internet governance and whatever we have there and transform that into a workshop. But at the same time, do not put this new plenary there at the end of the program, especially if we want to add a high-level dimension to it. So if we go ahead with this, I would look a bit into moving this plenary somewhere else, but not at the end of the day. Maybe instead of current plenary 3. And another proposal would be to maybe add more than just an hour to it. And because I see before most of the plenaries, we have some sort of keynotes, maybe we can drop those and make this plenary 1 hour and a half. Since look at us, we're already discussing for more than a half an hour on digital sovereignty. Imagine how this will happen at the EuroDIG itself. And that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Serena. And your final words basically presented kind of the solution, how we are going to handle this category. I see there is mutual understanding in this room that digital sovereignty should become a plenary. I made that already clear here on the matrix that participants can see in the room. Recent developments in Geneva with these efforts from the team around recommendation 5A and B, the German government and the UA government, also offered that opportunity to invite them for a session on day 0, which is a little bit broader, which is a kind of consultation session where we can basically handle all the proposals that have been under former plenary 4 now being workshop. I would even move that to day 0 in terms we get the German government to do this session here. They made tentatively already a commitment that they would be able to send someone because at the same time RightsCon is taking place in Costa Rica and they will be present at that one as well doing the same thing there. But I think we can handle that topic on day 0 with the German government, maybe even the other NRIs from the other regions. They said, by the way, they would be happy if the Asia Pacific IGF, if the Arab IGF, if they could join in EuroDIG and if we could do something together, that would be a perfect opportunity to also have a cooperation with the other NRIs. So I see this is rather clear. We have to look at the program later on, where to put that plenary and respect to the keynotes. Well, I would at the moment go with a short and focused plenary of 60 minutes, but we could offer the keynotes to those high-level participants that demand a keynote if they would like to participate, like inviting a commissioner or having someone high level from the Italian government speaking about this issue. And then we have keynote plus plenary, and that thing could cover digital sovereignty as an issue. And I see there is a lot of head nodding in this room. I'm very happy about that. Thomas, you demanding here from this side, you have something to say?
No, just, I think it would be an excellent idea to use the 0 day for the discussion on recommendation 5, because that is something that is difficult to do if you want to have an interactive dialogue in 1 hour or 1.5 hours. So if you have like 3 hours or something like we did it with the Germans and Andriette in Geneva, and ideally if we can invite other regional IGFs for the pre-date questions and funding and so on and so forth. But if that is possible, of course, that would be great, so that we can trigger a great discussion about the recommendation 5, giving this more time, but not taking the time of the substantive debates in EuroDIG. That would actually be a great thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Giacomo. Very short last word because we finished already that part. Where's the mic? Oh, okay.
No, very short. It's simply a consideration just to figure out what we are talking. The problem, for instance, is that through the platforms you can have personal data about your health. And now there are in Europe companies that are buying this data from American companies because they are allowed to have this data about personal health, and they use for not selling life insurance to European citizens. This is the exact picture of the problem we have to figure out. And I think that this is a problem of European citizens more than a problem for Putin. And this is the angle that we need to insist. And I think that there is a lot to discuss about that.
Mm-hmm. since you mentioned it, emerging technologies in healthcare, there is one proposal also under this category, IG development systems. We have the insurance company Generali sitting here in Trieste. They have the headquarter here, and we hope to get the CEO of Generali and maybe having a flash session in the plenary room about these kind of interference. That
the information from internet platforms.
Yes. Okay. I thank you very much for this. I think this was a very productive first part. We will continue with the other categories after lunch. So I also would like to thank our remote participants that are really active. It really adds a lot of people to the room. I'm also very thankful for the technical people and Rainer to set that up so that we can see them on screen, and I encourage remote participants to continue being so active. We will have a lunch break now until 2 o'clock and we'll reconvene in this room at 2 o'clock.